Now we have come to the final session of the first day, session 3, Freedom, External Factors and the Western Balkans is our session title.
Yeah.
And we have a speaker jumping from the earlier session, Admir Mešković from International University of Sarajevo. He is going to speak under this title, Who Gets to Say What is Halal? Sharia boards as private governance and the liberty problem of legitimacy in Islamic finance. Wow, this is a combination of discussions on legitimacy, on legal issues, and as well as philosophical and financial issues.
Yes, it's a good
quite an interdisciplinary area, which is quite going to be a quite difficult area, but we will hear you. So, from which department you are at? Please.
I'm also manager of Center for Islamic Finance, Innovation and Sustainability at IOS. So this paper actually it's very, very new, fresh, because I attended one computational science training at Ibn Khaldun University last
in
week.
Istanbul?
Yes.
Okay.
So I had another paper, but I sent information to it. I'm changing to this one.
Okay,
so
this is good because this who is going to say what is halal is also a discussion of limited government, constitutional government matters as well. So you have 15 minutes, not
15,
20.
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to remind you. So be quick. Mešković. Okay. Admir. Like, yeah. Okay. Okay, Admir, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you.
So as to have more time for discussion.
Thank you very much.
For myself.
yes. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So, as I said, the topic is who gets to say what's halal. It's a simple question with big consequences. It's around how ordinary people decide whether to trust authority, whoever says what is halal or not. So I focus on Sharia boards as a private governance. So as you know, Sharia board, every Islamic bank has it, every Islamic financial institution. If you ask me, it's probably the best invention in Islamic finance because first Islamic finance, they didn't have Sharia boards. So at some point of time, someone, I think it's Sheikh Salih Kamel, who introduced Sharia boards, and then everybody adopted. So role of Sharia board, you will see the roles, and actually I'm using large data set from Reddit on discussions about this. So Islamic finance is a moralized market. It promises access to modern finance while keeping us safe, hopefully, from interest, speculation, uncertainty, some prohibited or unethical industries, and so on. Product judgments are delegated to experts, mostly from Sharia boards. They are consisted of scholars. In most cases 5 people, in some cases 3, in some cases 7, and so on. They can be also national-wide. I have one paper which I published 2 years ago, which actually says that nationwide Sharia boards are totally inefficient, which I didn't expect this. I was expecting that if they are separate from Islamic banks, that they will work more, but no, actually, if they are government employees, they just do totally fine. So here's the puzzle. When something is certified, even something is certified, like Islamic banking products. I mean, what's interesting here is like in halal overall, we don't have Sharia boards. We buy halal meat, but we're not really sure. There is a certification. After certification, they have a lot of space to play around. While in Islamic finance, you have Sharia board and you have Sharia audit inside the bank, always present. However, most debates around halal is actually around Islamic finance, Islamic financial products. So, let's see the next slide. So, research question is who gets to say and how do non-experts legitimate. When I say non-experts, it's the regular people on Reddit. How do they legitimate or delegitimate that authority? So, as I said, it's a very fresh paper. I use Erhai from Islamic Finance from Reddit from 2013 to 2026. Its contribution around mapping how authority and legitimacy are invoked in everyday talk, and then attempting to propose some typology of lay legitimacy audits through integrity, procedure, and substance, and concept of conscience-compatible legitimacy that gives you space to audit these halal and to discuss. So when we say Sharia boards, as I said, you have rule articulation, you have certification, you have monitoring, enforcement of rules, resolution of disputes if employees of Islamic banks are not really sure if something is halal or not. So they are regulators here, but unlike state regulation, effectiveness depends heavily on legitimacy of these people, who they really are. So I'm using 11.5 thousand posts from Reddit and 62,000 comments from Reddit. As you can see, I downloaded the full archive on February 4. Then when I deleted some of them, I get to almost 61,000 when we exclude these deleted ones, removed, and so on. Of course, there are no usernames, some things that you can use to actually search and identify people who, but actually you can go to Reddit and find anyway. So it's a mixed method design with dictionary detection, authority cues such as scholar, board, fatwa, standard setting bodies, Sharia compliance, and you have legitimacy cues like conflict, rubber stamping, transparency, substance versus form, and so on. Then we had this machine learning part, which I used to joke last week, like it's magic. Nobody knows how it works, but it works. It gives you. It's not really like that. It's you can understand, but so far we can assume that it's magic, and we don't have to go into coding. And then thematic analysis of the core subset, where we had both authority and legitimacy in the same comment, and we had 328. So in most cases, discussion is around, is something halal or haram? That's something, as you will see, it's mostly around riba, whether something is like interest or not. Then how do I screen stocks or handle purification? It's another very debatable part of field of Islamic finance. I remember when I was involved in establishing Islamic index on Sarajevo Stock Exchange. I mean, there are very different approaches to stock screening. So if you using one or another can make stock halal or not halal. So you choose which one you prefer. I think maybe this around stock screening and stocks are generally more American. Why? Because of capital markets more developed there, while in Bosnia, like, nobody will probably ask for how to screen stocks, but you would have a lot of questions on interest in loans and financing and so on. How do I deal with mortgage, student loans, credit cards in a non-Islamic banking environment? We have some kind of, in Bosnia, we have non-Islamic as well. I worked in a bank for almost 8 years, which is an Islamic bank, but you don't have any regulation that allows you to be Islamic bank. So it's just kind of mimicking. So we have a lot of experience in establishing Islamic finance product where actually you cannot have Islamic finance product legally. So you see that it's actually important, more important to have substance than form. Okay, was it 25 minutes I had? Okay, thank you. So there are some gray areas that repeat from year to year: substance versus form, screening thresholds, mortgages, crypto, necessity, darura. We also have, for example, in Bosnia, we are using this principle to say, okay, this is based on this principle, we establish Islamic bank, and such bank actually is not really Islamic, but based on this principle, we can say this is the best we can do. Okay, authority cues, this is just statistics, because I have now less than 5 minutes. In most cases, authority cues are around riba or loans, guidance, then these standard and screening thresholds, then consulting scholar, funds, and so on. For first part of the findings, there are 3 logics on how people actually decide whether something is legit or not. There is incentive integrity audit. So are scholars or boards, Sharia boards, independent, or they are, let's say, captured? So even regular people, they see conflict of interest here. They are paid by the banks that they are in charge of. So you can probably expect a lot of rubber stamping and so on. Then there is procedural audit. Is the reasoning or standard traceable and explainable? I remember when some of these AIFI standards, you could not get them really. You have to pay to get the standard that is used to establish some product, which is, in my opinion, very stupid. But now actually you can access them freely. And then substance authenticity audit, which is substance versus form. In Muslim countries, usually you will see people simply following form. While on the West, I noticed even in UK, they are more like used to look at the substance, around anything. So what triggers suspicion is like if the firm pays the gatekeeper, how credible is the gatekeeping? I have a lot of experience with this in my previous work in Islamic banks. So since these scholars are compensated by institution they certify. Then you have procedural audits. Is the standard public traceable? Ask for reasons, cite standards, and so on. And substantive audit. This is just going into details what I mentioned before. So conscience-compatible legitimacy means that governance that lets non-expert act in line with conscience without blind following or without expert-level mastery. So you have three levels, again, 3 layers: incentive integrity, interpretive accountability? Is it transparent? And is it substance or just the form? These are just some example cues that I wanted to show you how we, what we used as a cues for integrity, procedure, and substance, how often it appeared in the subset. Then we have top terms or top fields, general halal haram disputes, then ask scholar, and so on. What is halal and who actually, this is kind of answer to the first part of the question, who says what is halal. So scholars in general, fatwa muftis, standard setting bodies, some specialized websites, imam, sharia boards. This one is American, AMGA, I suppose, I think, American Muslim Jurist, probably, Association. So how legitimacy is built is like through citing standards, naming institutions, procedural cues, so on. So subreddit on Islamic finance actually functions as a translation layer between these norms and everyday decisions. While when it comes to delegitimation audit, it is more around, does Islamic differ materially from riba? Because even in Bosnia you will see very often people will say, well, how is it different? I will pay even more with Islamic banks, so how are you helping? Then you have to explain some things that are that often actually come with this as some people said, riba with extra steps. So you have riba, but additional complication to structure it, so it's not gonna be riba, you know. So, but regular people again they'll say, okay, this is interest. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the case. So you have halal judgment with layered ecosystem. Reddit, in this case, Reddit was just acting as a translation of these. You have 3 layers of legitimacy and integrity, procedure, and substance. So when legitimacy becomes conscious, compatible, when it is reasonable, understandable, and when you can debate, you can ask questions, you can get answer. So people obviously they don't want blind following of these scholars or anything. They want to discuss, which is probably Reddit is more Western. People from the West are there, so they are more ready to challenge, to judge, and instead of blind following. So practical implication, I'm probably
sum up in a sentence.
yeah. So this is maybe one of the last slides. So for industry actors, Islamic banks should disclose board memberships, compensation structures. Board membership are usually disclosed, and especially when you have these star scholars, you have some Sharia board members that are members of 60 or 70 Sharia boards. So they are like Ronaldo or someone. It's good to have them on the team because they make, then publish product level Sharia opinions with summary from people who are not expert in the field, map product features, separate certification from marketing claims, which is of course very difficult. Then for regulators and standard settlers, just one point is that like when you have centralized model, like in some countries, if there is a failure, it will be even worse because the failure will, each and every Islamic banks will be touched by that kind of issue. So I just added this an additional question like what remains of an Islamic economic vision if everyday practice is dominated by just these discussions around permissibility rather than some vision, transformational discussions and so on, because you can have opportunity cost of that kind of dealing with these issues. Okay, so limitation of the research is like, okay, this is only one subreddit. It has a lot of comments, but probably you have to see who is who is audience on Reddit. After all, then dictionary detection is okay, descriptive. It was not full analysis of content, and in future, actually, someone mentioned, working on this, I got 3 or 4 ideas for future papers, only based on these discussions, because it's very interesting what people challenge, what they are discussing about. This, for example, this fatwa shopping appears a lot, because they say, okay, you are the bank, and you can simply pay these Ronaldos or whoever. So, thank you.
So you spoke for 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I have attended an International Economic Freedom meeting in Lebanese for some time ago, and there was a member of the International Board of Islamic Finance, and he was saying that they already follow the international financial institutions for the profit rates as well. But there are Muslims out there who feel comfortable with these fatwas of halal and haram rates and investing in Islamic banking. I know that's psychology as well. But this is your research, and you have also outlined the counter arguments as well. But here we are, out of your research, we also can have an opportunity to discuss what is wrong with the international or non-Islamic banking system, and how was the financial security sustained during Prophet's time, and what is the criteria defining the difference between interests and riba. So here we are now discussing and challenging the prejudices in state-leaning kind of collectivist understanding of markets in our Muslim societies, how we can reconsider these financial institutions, and how was the situation in Prophet Muhammad's time. Prophet was a merchant. There were his uncles who were dealing with financial security issues. How was that run, and what we can take from that time to today as lessons? And how can we discuss the differentiation between riba and interest?
Then you mentioned.
I am asking everyone, do you have a rest?
I mean, if
For
someone
a few
wants to
minutes,
come-
others can also
okay.
contribute and
Yes,
ask questions.
you.
This is an important topic for us, why we exist. So you have a rest for a little time, for a little minutes, I think. We can also take other questions and comments on this issue from people.
You want me or?
Whoever you
I
wanna.
wanted to say in response to your question, Ozlem, actually, and that is something which I have also explained earlier in the book. But here, very briefly, I think the major problem with discussion on Islamic finance and Islamic banking today, in the context of Islamic economics broadly, is that we seem to have, we think that this is the starting point of an economic organization of a society. back to the, as you asked, Prophet's time. This was actually, in his time, there was a problem of lending at exploitative rates. There was, the problem was real. But in Medina, when he set up the economic system, this was the last thing which he addressed. He set up the market, he set up the trade, taxation, market regulations, all that, and he only addressed the issue of riba in the last sermon, so it seems to me that now we have reversed the whole order of the economic organization, and we think that okay, we start with this, and then rest everything will fall together. So I think this is a problem in my view, and I take the distinction that I take the view that the modern banking as we practice today is not the same as riba. The question is of exploitation, and there's a social need of capital, there's a social need of lending. How do we address that? That is something which the financial system should be able to address.
Thank you. Şöyle gelelim, siz hepsini toplarsınız. Yes, Bedir.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go back to the point you mentioned, how was the situation at the time, and all that stuff. And I heard someone, I unfortunately can't remember who mentioned in the morning that someone said that the Prophet ﷺ did something as a leader and not as a prophet. I don't know who said that. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good entrance to a full chapter actually in the again in the Islamic legal theory. It's called Tasawwufat al-Nabawiyya, the prophetic behavior.
Yes.
And in this chapter, the usul scholars discuss the prophet as a leader, the behavior of the prophet as a human being, the behavior of the prophet as a legislator, etc. So we find that the category of his commercial behavior, what he sold, what he bought, the same way we can include the way he was dressing up, the way he looked like, his clothes, the way he was used to walk, to drink, to eat, to sleep. It's all just human behavior, and the majority of usul scholars do not consider that as a form of legislation. So you cannot take from it halal, haram, makruh, mustahab, hukm. You cannot derive a ruling from that. That's his human behavior, and he is the one who said, Allahu huwa al-musta'an. In the morning we mentioned that hadith. God is the one who determines the prices, and he is also the one who said, "Antum a'lamu bi umuri dunyakum." You are better. You know the worldly affairs better than me. So this is also another hadith of Sahih Muslim. So in this, I just want to put this that not everything the Prophet did concerning buyu'a and mu'amalat, the financial things, must be considered as a reference in financial issues. And I think that this is a thing that was clearly and extensively, as Ali referred to, discussed in the past. But which past? So we have here the jurists who developed these systems, not to impose. And here I open the parenthesis of people who want to discuss these rulings with these authorities. They have never been forced to accept these rulings. That's why the classical discourse categorizes people into three levels based on their intellectual capabilities. So if you reach a certain level of familiarity with the texts and tools, you can yourself derive a ruling based on the texts and using those tools. So you can decide for yourself what is riba and what is not. And Islamic jurisprudence grants this right for you. Like there's no authority that tells you must accept the Shafi'i school or Maliki school or whatsoever, or this mufti or that superstar mufti or that's a right granted by Islamic law. And this, if you're not at that level of ijtihad, right, you are muqallid, then you have your school of thought, which is actually centuries old a tradition of practices and differences and discussions, etc. If you're less, then you are ammi, and then you are again free to choose who to ask. These issues are simply discussed. This is just to say that again, this separation of Islamic finance from the Islamic jurisprudence as a whole is what creates this problem and brings these stress and anxiety and issues to the Muslim communities, especially in the West. Like how to deal, who says how to deal with halal or haram in financial issues? It must simply be treated like any other chapter of Islamic jurisprudence. Like who decides about that is according to these three levels, more or less, that the Muslim has like a very wide range of freedom to choose from. And labeling or creating a new field of fiqh, calling it Islamic finance. Why? I don't see the relevance of that.
We got your position. Okay.
I have a small intervention based on Mr. Badr's comment. Actually, Islamic finance is not a branch of Islamic jurisprudence. No. Islamic finance, if you define it, so basically, ontologically, epistemologically, ethically. So basically, it is Islamic belief, Islamic law, and Islamic ethics, all of them are together. But the problem is that, especially in the Western context, always they tend to reduce Islamic finance to Sharia law. It's the more Sharia the way how the Western define it, always as something legal. But the Sharia itself, in the Islamic context, it goes beyond the law. It goes to belief, law, and ethics. So it's not a branch of Islamic jurisprudence. But
all the things based on this three, right?
yeah, basically, Islamic finance is not finance. Islamic finance is belief, law, and ethics. And that actually is what is Islamic finance. That's actually the conclusion that I arrived after studying Islamic finance for almost 10 years. But the issue that we have here is like, when we talk about who decides what is halal, okay? So what came to my mind when I read this actually title is we are talking about the halal industry. Okay? So we tend to focus more into halal, but we don't focus on tayyib.
On?
Tayyib, because tayyib is mean good. I give you example, which maybe it's not relevant, but it's linked. I give you example. Now in the UK, or in the Muslim country, in the non-Muslim countries, we struggle to find halal food. So we try to find it. So if we find, sometimes you have the halal, you see the halal restaurant. In the UK, they have to put like the hygiene, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the rate. Always you tend to find that the focus more into the halal, but are they doing it in the right way? Is it tayyib? Is it good? Is it good food? That actually is one of the major issues that we have. Same thing, if you want to reduce it into Islamic finance, it's the same thing. So yes. True or not, Edo? We used to talk about this one.
Yeah.
So it's halal, it's legal, okay? It comply with, the form is okay, but how about the substance? Here is the major issue that we have, that until now Islamic finance, that it repeats itself. It doesn't really actually uncover the real issue. So
Thank you.
the best way actually to resolve this is to find somebody who has knowledge in Islamic law and Islamic finance. That's actually the way how can we address.
We will find somebody.
Yes, but we don't. Unfortunately, most of the either you find someone is literate in finance but not literate in Islamic law, or vice versa. So that really is a combination that we need.
Okay. Short?
Very short.
Okay.
First of all, I fully agree with you. When I'm in England, we'll say halal, but the hygiene in the restaurant, I'd rather eat in the toilet.
Okay. All right.
But on your point, and thank you for your paper, and Dr. Bazir,
Sonrası
It seems as though there are three major issues that we always have to be confronted with.
Olsun,
One is
tabii.
agency, one is authenticity, and the other is authority.
Buna bakmak
And in
lazım.
the U.S. right now, the Fiqh Council of North America, as you may know, just has declared that it is halal to give zakat to political campaigns. And this is creating, I mean, as you can imagine, quite a bit of a stir. So I see your intervention as being incredibly important because there's no floor now. I mean, as far as what can be then considered halal, if it is, as you said, regarded by also the standard of bay'ah. Well, it's good for Muslims to be involved in political engagement, so therefore they should do it. But by incentivizing and by saying this is where you should put your zakat as opposed to your disposable income. So I just wanted to comment.
Yeah, interesting issue. Ahmet hocam.
And shortly, I can
If you
say
make
this-
short
Yeah.
points, we can translate if you want.
Please translate.
Okay.
Okay. Yani benim şu an devam ettiğim kitapta da bu konuları çok geniş açıklıyorum. Bir defa İslami finansı ahlaki bir piyasa olarak tanımlamak doğru değil bence. Çünkü piyasaların ahlakı olmaz, insanların ahlakı olur. Piyasaların nasıl biçim alacağı insan davranışlarının şekillendirdiği bir husustur. Ve burada da bizim referans noktamız adalet olması lazım. Yani kuralların herkese eşit uygulanması. Dolayısıyla böyle bir piyasa, kuralların herkese eşit olarak uygulandığı bir piyasa bizim için esastır. Bunu ahlaki veya gayri ahlaki nitelemek doğru değil. Bir. İki, İslami finans diye sunulan reçetelerin çok önemli bir kısmı cahiliye döneminde de kullanılan yöntemlerdir. Riba hariç, müdaraba, müşaraka bunların hepsi cahiliyede vardır. Dolayısıyla bunlar İslami diye tarif etmek bir defa doğru bir şey değil. Onun yerine yani İslam'ın uygun gördüğü, cevaz verdiği yöntem gibi bir şey kullanmak daha doğru olur. Sanki bunlar İslam'ın emrettiği şeylermiş gibi.
Orası
Bu kesinlikle yanlış. Artı finans piyasalarının işlevlerine çok yanlış bakılıyor. Çünkü finans piyasalarının amacı riski dağıtmak ve fon sağlamaktır.
bir saniye. Bu çok önemli.
Yani dolayısıyla bizim Müslüman bilim adamlarının yaklaşımı bir defa çıkış noktası itibariyle
Ekonomi
yanlış.
bilmiyorlar.
Yani, bir de şeyi söyleyeyim. Bu
Orada bitirelim.
Onu da söyleyeyim çok kısa. Bunları zaten
Evet.
okuyacaklar kitap. Yani şeriat kuralları ekonomik konularda çok yanlış şeyler söylüyor. Bir örnek Türkiye'den vereyim. Hayrettin Karaman. Hayrettin Karaman çok popüler bir isim. Büyük bir alim. Yani dini konularda çok saygımız var. Ama ekonomik konularda söylediği şeylerin çoğu yanlış.
Ekonomi bilmeyen
Okay.
alimlerin ekonomik konularda fetva
Bilmesi
kabul
edilemez.
Çok yanlış.
Evet.
Yani detaya girerdim ama
Yes.
şimdi...
So Ahmet Uzun is now working on a book about riba, the history of Islamic finance. So he says Islamic finance concept is not true, and Islamic finance does not create a moral market. And actually, people have morals, not markets. So we need justice as a reference point, procedural justice among the financial transactions. Secondly, those Islamic finance institutions like Mudaraba, they come from the Jahiliyyah periods. So we understand as if Islam orders these methods of interaction. Instead, we have to look for what Islam permissions in terms of our rules of conduct. Thirdly, we need to realize that financial markets distribute risks and finance. Related with that, Sharia laws modern Sharia laws, of course, which are interpreted by modern people, they ignore the rules of economics. They
And justice.
ignore the rules of economics and procedural justice. Usually those ulama declaring, giving fatwa within Sharia laws, they do not understand the economic institutions, how economics work in society. Is it enough? Mustafa Hoca? One final, and then him.
Not permissible a fatwa given by an ulama who has no idea about economics, who doesn't know economics. What does economics mean? What is purchasing power? What is inflation? How the printed money create, economic relations, distorts. He has no idea about this, and he says this is haram, this is halal, so it is unacceptable.
Okay. You have 1 minute.
Okay. Okay. Actually, this is why very often in the history of Islamic finance, we have first prohibition, then they learn about economics and finance. Okay, that's actually okay. Whatever product is it. Okay, so when I had a job offer from Islamic Bank, I contacted local scholar. I said, can I do? He asked, there is a Sharia board, right? So they take over the scene. So that's one very nice thing about Sharia boards, so you can be free, okay.
Yeah.
So when we discuss riba versus interest, actually mainstream definition of riba today is the most extreme one that we can find. There are others. Riba in Prophet's time was not as interest today. It was much more difficult. And socio-economic situation was not the same. You could become a slave because of riba at that time. And now, alhamdulillah, you cannot, at least that. Okay, so when talking about mudaraba, it's not really, it was pre-Islamic, but it was practiced by Prophet as well. But what was the interesting situation today is you almost cannot find mudaraba musharaka in Islamic law. When you go to United States or to UK, you will, of course, it's not called musharaka. It's called joint venture capital. And
Islamic
you
joint
give,
venture capital. You give money to people, and they have trust in you. You have trust in them. They use it. I remember when I was in Turkey on one training, they said we had mudaraba 20 years ago. We gave a guy Turkey finance. Yes.
And he just disappeared. That's the problem.
Yilmaz finance, then disappear. Yes.
That is one problem. And of course, this is very, very important when talking about substance versus form. Halal is just like whether the animal was slaughtered this way or that way. Nobody asked if the guy was paid who slaughtered. Nobody asked this. Nobody asked, many other things, how animal was treated other than slaughtering. But this is totally different,
Yes. Thank you so much. May Allah bless us life and motivation. We need to study and produce more on these debates. You are all invited to write shorter articles as well for our Substack, for our Idrak Weekly. Why not? Write 1 week, one of you. Next week, the other one can respond to that person. And we can continue this debate on Idrak Weekly.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a
you very
lot
much.
for the presentation.
Now, the final presentation.
The final presentation from our hosts, Edo Omerčević. Yes, Edo is at International University of Sarajevo as well. Is going to speak on economic freedom in the Western Balkans, external influences, and the role of Islamic ethics. Edo, you have 10 minutes.
As the last speaker, we have only 5 minutes, right?
15 diyorum, 20 konuşturuyorum. Şimdi 10 diyorum,
Başta
15
10
konuşsun. 20 desen 25 konuşacak.
He knows that this is just a strategy. You will not confuse him. He will speak half an hour.
You have 10 minutes set up.
I brought you water, I got your Wi-Fi, so please. So I'm thinking all the time I want. No, I'm kidding. Well, I was actually afraid that this is going to happen. I tend anyway to speak fast, and when you put me under time pressure, then I speak even faster. So I think we'll manage to put this under the time limit. So the presentation for me is economic freedom in the Western Balkans. What are the current perspectives and the role of Islamic values? So joint research by me and my colleague Riyad Kovac, who is unfortunately not here. Why? Because he's currently negotiating with the politicians from Republika Srpska about incentives of EU and the growth plan and the initiatives here to improve economic freedom in Bosnia. So I'm doing it theoretically, he's doing it practically in the field. Anyway, the outline of my presentation is I will first do a full presentation, and this will not count into my time. Then I will do the introduction, current level of economic freedom in the Western Balkan countries, institution, historical contingencies and development in the Western Balkan, EU policy diffusion and reform incentives, and then values, Islam and institutions in Western Balkan countries. And of course the conclusion. So when it comes to the full presentation, it is based on the previous International Islam and Liberty Network conference, where I presented the Islam and Liberty Index for 2024, which was an overview of religious, political and economic freedom in the OIC countries. This was basically our attempt to define freedoms as we seen them to be defined. It's based on human freedom and only for OIC members and observers countries. Now, what we noticed during that analysis is that we have clusters of freedom. So what means clusters? If you look at the map of the OIC countries, you can see clusters of the level of freedoms. So, for example, you will see that the most free countries in OIC countries are the Gulf countries. You have Oman, you have Emirates, you have Qatar, Kuwait. So these are like the very free countries. Then you have the restrictive countries with Iran, with Iraq, with Afghanistan, a little bit with Turkey. And then again, you have a lot of freedom in South America. We have 2 OIC members in South America. And then you can't see it on the map, but this is where we are from, and I will put the larger one. You can see that here we are doing very well when it comes to the Muslims. We are top in the world when it comes to the Muslim world. So Bosnia Herzegovina and Albania as the Muslim majority countries and members of OIC and observer country, we are one of the most free countries in the OIC membership. So then the question comes, and this is the full presentation, the introduction to my actual presentation. So what is so special about us here in Bosnia and Albania? Why are we doing so well? We are also Muslims, we are also majority, so why are we so special? Are we so special? That's basically the question. And now comes the actual presentation. So what are the causes of level of development, or in this case, economic freedom in this region, Western Balkan? And the question is it the cultural and religious norms, or is it based on political and economic institutions which are present in the region? And what are the historical junctures that created these long-run divergences? When it comes to the Western Balkan, we will not go too far into the history, but the end of the last century was marked by, in our case, socialism. In case of Albania, it was even worse. It was marked by communism. So they had a very, very harsh communist regime, which was much harsher than what we had in Yugoslavia and essentially Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we have Tito and Enver Hoxha, who marked basically the end of the last century and left a really long-lasting mark in this region. And then, of course, there was the dissolution of Yugoslavia, which resulted with a lot of conflicts in the region. Right? With a lot of conflicts in the region, we all are familiar with the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which resulted also with Srebrenica, with one of the largest massacres in the modern era. But the whole region was marked by military conflicts and wars. So Serbia had conflicts, Montenegro had conflicts, Kosovo had conflicts, North Macedonia had conflicts, the only exception being Albania. So here Albania was a little bit safe, but again, they suffered a lot during the communist era. So essentially what we are having here in this area, it is an area which is being marked by a very strong socialist communist regime and a lot of military conflicts. Now we are societies in transition from state-dominated to market economies. We started with very weak rule of law and non-market institutions. And it is to be expected that we have a very strong collectivist mentality. All right? Very strong collectivist mentality, which is most probably based on the inheritance of the socialist and the communist regimes. And of course, we practice a lot of traditional values. All right? Now, this is very important because it will influence when it comes to the next slides. So we have a strong collectivist mentality and traditional values. When it comes to the current level of economic freedom, the Western Balkan countries, now I have included all of them, irrespective of are they Muslim majority or not, we are essentially all the same. The whole region, Bosnia Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo, Albania, North Macedonia, we are all moderately free. Now, why is this important? Because the demographic and the cultural structure is different. So we have Bosnia Herzegovina, majority Muslim countries, Albania, total majority Muslim, Kosovo also. We have Serbia, which is Orthodox. We have Montenegro, also Orthodox. North Macedonia, also Orthodox with mixtures of Muslim population. But when it comes to economic freedom, we have very similar levels of economic freedom. Now, this is important because this shakens a little bit the cultural argument. And this is why I think someone, Admir said today that Bosnia is a very good case study when you want to analyze everything because we have a very decentralized country. And he mentioned we are doing very well compared to the other countries. No, we are not. The whole region is doing similarly well or similarly bad. But what is interesting, we have a very different demographic structure in each of these countries, but we are all very close by, very nearby. So we can see, okay, do these cultural differences, do they influence the outcome? Do they influence anything at all? Or is it all the same? Now, when it comes to the level of economic freedom in this region, it seems it's all the same. If we go to the table, okay, I'm very happy that we can actually see. I was afraid we'll not be able to see. I use the index of economic freedom from the Heritage Foundation. The reason why I use the Heritage Foundation, even though I actually like the Fraser Index more, is because the Fraser Index does not include Kosovo. So Heritage includes it, so that's why I fixed to Kosovo, but do keep in mind that the correlation between the two indexes is very, very high. So essentially, similar results are also being provided by the Fraser Foundation. Now, what can we see here? Okay, what can we see here? Albania is top in the region. Albania is top in the region, ranked 50 in the world, but also, again, moderately free with 66.6 overall score. Serbia is next, 14 places down, Serbia 64, and then Montenegro, and the last one is Kosovo on 78. But when it comes to the overall score, they're actually all very nearby. So Albania, the top with 66.6, and Kosovo, the last one, with 61.7. Now, more interesting than this is when we go to the subcategories. And I've basically highlighted with red those where we do very, very bad. And where are we doing very, very bad? It is the property rights, it is the government integrity, and it is the judicial effectiveness. Where are we actually doing very well? You know, it is the tax burden. For example, North Macedonia has one of the least tax burdens in the world, almost full mark for the freedom on tax burden. Government spending, here we are also very bad. Fiscal health, we are also doing very nice. Kosovo being also, again, one of the top countries in the world. Business freedom, we are doing okay. Labor freedom, that's a little bit worst. Monetary freedom, we are also okay. Trade freedom, we are also fine. Kosovo, again, being one of the most free countries in the world. Investment freedom, we are okay. And financial freedom, we are doing okay. So looking at the colors, you can already see a concentration. Where are we doing bad? It's not the market mechanisms. We are okay when it comes to tax burden. We are okay when it comes to fiscal health. We are okay when it comes to business freedom, monetary freedom. But where we are really, really doing bad is institutional quality. Now here the column institutional quality is not part of the index. This one I have comprised of a simple average of the indicators from the index. Property rights, government integrity, and judicial effectiveness. And here we are restricted. We are basically categorized as unfree countries when it comes to institutional quality. This is very, very important. Now, what was the starting point? The starting point with the data which is available from the late 90s, as you can see, there was a large difference between the individual countries. But as time was passing by, what is happening? We are all improving when it comes to overall economic freedom, and we are coming closer and closer to each other. So essentially, the whole region is integrating into the same level of economic freedom, irrespective of demographic, cultural, and ethnical structure. But we also can notice that once we reach the moderately free level, we started to stagnate. Something is happening. We cannot move forward as a region. We cannot continue with the improvement of the freedom. So here the question comes, okay, what is happening? What is going on? So institutional quality is persistently low, but when it comes to the market mechanism aspects of economic freedom, it is on the rise. So we have more and more open economies, we have more and more ease of doing business, monetary freedoms, the currencies are stable, the tax burden is under control. Essentially, even Bosnia is, I might even say from a business perspective, like Syria right now, it is a tax haven. Like, you know, it is just 10% on profit. The most expensive when it comes to the tax is the tax on labor, but when it comes to the overall cost, that is the smallest component in your business, most probably. So essentially, it's a very low tax burden for big businesses. Financial investment freedoms are on the rise, but this is actually a problematic combination. And this is what I also commented today when we were discussing about the minimum wages. Now, why is it a problematic combination if you combine market mechanisms, very strong market mechanisms, with very low institutional quality? Because the data is showing when you combine these two, so very strong market mechanism, very low institutional quality, what is happening? You have inequality, but not the inequality we are referring to, the inequality between the different levels of quality. We are talking about inequality on a systematic, institutionalized level, where it doesn't matter are you good or not, if you're not within the system, you are going to be negatively discriminated. So what we are actually saying here is, yes, you have market mechanisms, but the access to the market mechanisms is not equal. So someone has more access, someone doesn't have more access. Now, also very interesting, the study was very, very interesting to me. When you have a combination like this, what might happen is that actually the incumbent participants, the weaker participants, are more likely to survive than productive ones. In Bosnia, we have a saying, I will say it in Bosnian, then I'll try to translate the meaning, is snašao se. Snašao se would mean like, you know, how could we translate this? Hamza, how can we translate? He found a solution. You know the right person, you call the right person, your cousin is at the right place. It's not about do you have intrinsic quality or not. It is, do you have these other mechanisms available which will make you to survive. So if you have these kind of structures, we have strong market mechanisms and very low institutional quality, many times what will happen, it is actually the lower quality population which will emerge as successful. And that's why we also have, for example, very often brain drains from this region. It is the ethical, successful people who cannot stand it anymore, and then basically they leave and they go to the West because they cannot survive in this kind of system. So when we have higher levels of 10 more minutes, I brought you one.
No, just 2
Higher
minutes.
levels of economic freedom without institutional quality is very risky, and it can actually lead to possible negative results.
2 minutes.
Sure. Possible negative perceptions towards economic, and this is also very important, but I think we need to be very careful, pushing for market mechanisms where institutional quality is very low, and which might result with these negative outcomes, might actually result with the negative perception of economic freedom in general, because the average man, he doesn't go into deep analysis. He analyzes what is his life. So we have more trade, I'm poorer. We have more business incentives. The guy is driving a Porsche and I cannot pay my bills. So what is happening? There's a negative attitude towards market mechanisms and economic freedom in general. Now, what is the problem? The problem is institutional quality. It's not the market mechanisms, it is institutional quality. So we come to the Western Balkans. What are the perspectives? Now, and why do we have these bad institutions? Is it, again, something cultural or is it something else? I will make it brief, very, very briefly, shortly. We had significant historical junctures which has affected the path we are on. One of them is definitely socialism and communism. Like, for example, the part of the two Germanys. You have basically the German people, all the same, everything the same. One was capitalist, one was socialist, communist. and basically out of them you grew up totally different institutions, totally different environments, totally different people. Then we had military conflicts of the 90s and the early 2000s, which basically resulted with very strong post-socialist and post-conflict power structures. Now these power structures, they've created their interest in the redistribution instead of the creation of wealth. They're using the institutions to redistribute the wealth, of course, into their favor and not actually to create a market for the creation of wealth. So, of course, these also power structures, they do the prevention of establishment of inclusive institutions. Now, this is very, very important thing, and I think I need to take more time because this is very, very important. Let's say, for example, that we're pushing in Bosnia what EU is doing for good governance, based on power structures which have established themselves after, for example, a war conflict. Now, these power structures have been accepted by these interest groups as a kind of peace agreement deal. We will make peace, but we control the power structures. If you are going into destroying these power structures and these institutions, the peace itself becomes endangered. And this is what we have in Bosnia. So, for example, in Bosnia, we're fighting against the holders of these big institutions, and immediately what do we have? We have calls for war, for separation, for conflicts. We need, soldiers, everything, etc. So the more you push for the change in the institutions, the more you're pushing the society into the conflict. Why? Because you are trapped by the power forces which are controlling the institutions. And Bosnia is one of the biggest examples for this in the region. EU, now this is also very important. Why? Coming to the question, why are we as Bosnia and as Albania doing so good compared to the rest of the world? Maybe because we are European Muslim or something. No, I don't think it is because of that, but it is because we are in Europe. And our neighbor we are very lucky that we have EU as our neighbor. And the policy diffusion of EU is a very constructive policy when it comes to the Western Balkan region. Why? The primary goal of the European Union is to unify Europe around democracy, rule of law, human rights, and a market economy. Now, initially they started value-driven. They took the Central European countries, the core of the European countries. When it came to the Balkan, they stopped. They lost a little bit this value-driven approach, and they became a little bit. Also with Turkey, I guess they also said, we stop here, all right? But again, historical circumstances, since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, European Union again renewed this interest of the enlargement process. So they again have approached the Western Balkan area in order to see how they can basically become part of the European Union. Now, why is this important? For us to join European Union, what European Union is, they are diffusing their policies and they're aligning our policies that they fit the European Union. And they're willing to spend tons of money for this purpose. The incentives are huge to make reforms which will bring us closer to European Union. I will not go through all the billions. You can see all the billions which are made available. But the last plan which is being proposed for the Western Balkan area is the growth plan, which is basically a plan of reform plan from 24 to 27. It's a 6 billion euros grant, and it is focused on institutional reforms, economic reforms, and regional integration. Now, what does it include? It includes basically all these aspects which are looking market mechanisms and institutional quality. But what is important to say, when it comes to the funding, when it comes to these policies, they are not interbinded, which means countries agree that they will enter these reform processes, but they're not obliged to do reforms in institutional quality in order to get access to do reforms in market mechanisms. So what these power structures are doing, they will do the reforms in market structures in order to get access to the funds and also benefit from better market institution without affecting institutional quality, which then results in negative impact outcomes from the market mechanisms in the society. People feel they're becoming poorer, people feel they're becoming more under pressure, people feel there's more inequality, people feel the creation of different levels of control in the society and so on. And we can see when it comes to the utilization of these funds, overall until now about 6% has been utilized, but when it comes to institutional quality, only 3%. So basically 50% has been used for institutional quality, even though this is the most difficult part and most important one for economic freedom.
Shall we finish?
Sure.
Stop. take a few contributions and then you will have the
Sure.
final words to sum up. Thanks a lot. Yes.
I have a question. So, very interesting. Thank you very much.
20 minutes you had.
Good presentation. Just one question. Croatia has joined the EU. Bosnia, no. Serbia, no. Does it mean that Croatia has good institutional setting?
No, actually, in the paper it is being mentioned. It had better, but not so much. But it was value-driven in the beginning, which means that value-driven in the beginning, which means they were more tolerant to policies which were not aligned with the EU. So if they met like the minimum criteria, they would include them into European Union and then continue with the reforms later on. They would align. Now they've stopped with this approach. Now they want everything to be aligned before they accept you. So they have basically changed the approach a bit. It was a bit lighter, light-hearted when it came to Croatia. Now there is a conspiracy. There is a conspiracy. It is because it's Catholic-based Christian country. So they accepted Serbia. It's Orthodox, closer to Russia. Bosnia Muslims, Turkey Muslims. So there's this conspiracy that because of that they don't want it in the EU. But officially the approach was a little bit softer in the beginning, and then they stopped. They lost the interest. But now it is being revived due to Russian pressure.
Romania is Orthodox and they are in the EU.
Who?
Romania.
Romania. Yeah, there are some differences. Yeah, it was. So this one is really political. But now, as I said, given the activities of Russia, the interest has been renewed. So they are like afraid that Russia might spread its influence here in the region, and now they're spending a lot of money to try to bring the other countries closer to European Union.
Yes.
Thanks, Edo. You mentioned that the level of economic freedom is high.
Compared to other Muslim countries.
Your West Balkans.
Compared to other Muslim majority countries.
Yes. Like the USSR and Yugoslavia also disintegrated. This group is called transition countries. Why has the Western Balkans been more successful than the others?
I couldn't finish, but essentially my idea is that it is because of EU policy diffusion. That was which I couldn't get to it. It is not that we are, more enlightened or something. No, actually, when you look at the historical situation which we have here, we should do very bad as well. But we have EU as our neighbor, and they're spending a lot of money on us, on Albania, on Bosnia, on everyone, to do the policy reforms, and to basically improve economic freedoms. And they are successful in this. My problem is they are only successful in improving market mechanisms. But institutional quality remains very, very low. And there is a limit how much you can go. For example, if you continue pushing, yes, we can, let's liberalize everything, But with low institutional quality, what you will have here, you will have a slavery system. Because you have low institutional quality. Corruption is very high, access to contracts is very high, you will have a bunch of powerful people who are very, very rich, and the rest will be, just...
Here in Bosnia.
I understand you, and I fully agree with you. I don't like the European bureaucrats at all, their mentality limiting free markets indeed. But authoritarian systems, military interventions, military coup d'etat destroy institutions, just like it was in Turkey as well.
Absolutely.
And the integration, through the integration process to EU, European Union and European Commission gives so many funds, not only to civil society organizations, but also to public offices in Turkey. And it really increases the institutional capacity. On the top, how to act within a budget. We even need to learn, our institutions, public institutions, to learn how to operate within a budget, within a time frame. Even we had to learn this, both our public organizations and civil organizations, NGOs, through EU projects, EU funds, we learned how to work in a systematic and professional way.
If I may
Yes,
jump
please.
in. So if I sounded like I'm criticizing the EU, absolutely not. I'm saying the reason why we have economic freedoms is not because we are enlightened, but because of EU. They're helping us a lot to do these economic reforms, and that's why we are in advance front. I'm saying the problem is with the mechanisms they're using, we're not changing institutional quality because of the power forces. Now, there are studies which have analyzed how does it affect institutional quality, and the result in the next slides, it's mentioned the studies, that they're mostly superficial and they're retracted once the funds dry out.
Yeah.
So essentially these power structures, of course, they want the access to the funds, they want to justify the continuation of the funds, they will do some reforms on paper, but substantially nothing is changing. The corruption is still there, the mechanism, the bureaucracy is still there, the interest groups are still there, the power groups are still there, the same faces are still there, everything is still there, until the funds are there, and so it dries up. And I wanted to go there and check the conclusion. If I may go to the conclusion, Ali is going through my slides, I think. So which I'm almost close by. So, Ali, stop. So, EU gives incentives, and we are very thankful. That's why I said we are very happy that we have EU as our neighbor. And then, for example, I don't know, China, Russia, if I may say this officially, but they cannot enforce implementation. All right, they cannot. And my next question is, okay, then what about Islam? And this was like the last part of my thing. Is Islam going to affect here anything? When it comes to, again, studies, individualist culture, they have better institutions. Now here, as I mentioned, that's why in the beginning I mentioned, we have collectivist culture. Non-traditional values results with better institutions, we have traditional values. So these are all negative forces. When it comes to Islam, it is absolutely aligned, of course, with quality institutions. You need to be transparent, you need to be accountable, you need to consult people, you need to consider public welfare. That stands. But Islam is also contributing to collectivist mentality and also to traditional values, which are contributing to stability of institutions, even in the case when institutional quality is low. It becomes very difficult to change them. All right? So in general, I would say, even though we have Islam, it has no impact for the future of economic freedom on Western Balkans. But what has, and this is my concluding, yeah, of course, historic impact is negative. Sorry.
Sorry,
Yes.
not in the condition.
Yeah, sorry.
Just 1 second, please. This one, very important.
Yeah, this is very actually important. Huh? So we have negative impacts. So what is the positive impact? And this is what I want to put here. The positive impact on the future perspective of economic freedom here, it's not Islam, it is EU policy diffusion. If they can maintain, if can find a way to motivate the local power structures to accept these things, we can go forward. But the strong power dependency and lock-in effects are definitely a very strong negative impact on Western Balkans.
Just let me ask you a question. I like the presentation both because it's most related to the political science that I'm dealing with. So my question is now, does Europeanization, so dealing with policy diffusion, means de-Daytonization? And de-Daytonization is not stepping away from the Dayton, but upgrading Dayton.
That is the danger which we are facing continuously. Because one of the major conditions is we need to get rid of the 3-presidency system. We must have 1 presidency system to join EU, which again the power structures are not going to accept. There's simply too much power included. So if we push for it, what are we pushing for? We're pushing for conflict. Another thing is de-Daytonization, as you have said. We have a very strong political, not fraction, what do you call it, political powers, which is absolutely against it, and they're ready to go for conflict regarding this point. So essentially, even if we push for this, with the objective to increase economic freedom, essentially what are we doing? We're pushing the society into conflict because of very, very powerful interests, which are very, very ready to sacrifice human lives in order to maintain their power structures. So one needs to be very, very smart how one approaches these things. This is not like, we find something is good and then let's do it because it is good. People are unethical with the release of Epstein files. I think we get a better insight of how much evilness actually is out there in power structures and what people are ready to do in order to maintain power. So I think we have to be very, very careful how we act in our societies.
But another question is, you mentioned that when you have strong market mechanism versus strong market mechanism versus institutional quality. You talk about that. So what does it mean? So it means that if you have strong market mechanism in higher institutional quality, what does
me give you an example. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say I want to do a business, all right? Location is very important, Mazal, right? Location is very important for business success. So you go as a very ethical, nice man, and you say, this is a nice location, can I get this location? And the government tells you, you cannot get the license to do this business. Okay. If no one can get the license, that's fair. But then you will see 2 months later, another guy will get this license to do the business there. Are you with me? So, yes, you are allowed to do business. Everyone is allowed to do business. Of course, like in any country, you have licensing. You cannot do business anywhere. You know, you have some areas which are restricted, everything, etc., etc. But then you see that some people are not subject to these kind of laws. They are allowed to do these kind of businesses. They are allowed to do stuff which is not allowed to anyone else. And then what do you see? You have regulations. For example, we have free market. You can import anything into Bosnia. You just need licensing. So your license takes 6 months. While you're doing the 6 months, someone else got it for 1 month, and then he's doing the business, he's making the money. And then when you analyze, it's basically one group of people who is doing it. And we are on the side, and you know, we have free markets, we have no social system, no social security, no minimum wages, very low minimum wages. And then you need to fight in a free market environment, which is not free, because it is controlled by power structures. So who are the most influential or the most powerful people here in Bosnia? It is people very close to politics. And I'm sure in many other societies as well. So that's basically, so with market mechanisms, everything is allowed, but it is selective implementation.
Okay, that's very interesting.
We had like very powerful people, very, very powerful people. we have billionaires also in Bosnia. We have billionaires in Bosnia. And for example, I don't want to mention the exact case because it can be identified. They were literally allowed to build business entities in areas which by urban plans were not allowed. So they get what? They get not comparative advantage, they get absolute advantage in the market. So they capture the market, capture the market, capture the market. And you are standing on the side and say, is this free market? Is this economic freedom? If this is economic freedom, and that's just for people, long live Tito. And who is Tito? The one who took all the liberties. So by promoting economic freedom without following with the institutional quality, it is very, very risky for long-term perception of economic freedom. But we have to be very careful because there are power structures involved in institutional quality. And we know this even in the US. You know, I'm very interested to see economic freedom indices in 2-3 years. Because there's a gap of 2-3 years. So for example, when you take the economic freedom of 2025, it is based on data from 2023. And then the data collection, everything, etc. I'm very, very much interested to see, once you shake it, how immediately the institutions are closing and actually they're showing their true colors. Power structures, they know what they're doing.
All right, we can finish up the day, I think. Thank you so much. We had a quite fruitful, insightful discussions all throughout the day. Thank you all for joining and intensely following all presentations. This is not an easy task. We will see each other during the dinner in the hotel, right? From hotel at 6:30. And we will start tomorrow at 10. Right? 10
I
a.m.?
think you said 9:45.
9:45.
9:45. We'll have 50
9:45.
minutes of discussion and then we'll have the presentation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Because the reason is the one speaker unfortunately is sick and he could not join us if I
He couldn't.
program.
He is Muqtadar
Yeah,
Khan.
Muqtadar Khan, yes, he was supposed